Okay, so what other alternatives forms are there? Oh, I have tokens here. I'm not going to talk about tokens now, but crowdfunding is an interesting thing. So there are other ways how you get crowdfunding. Now, in some sense, peer-to-peer lending is a form of crowdfunding already. So what we're interested now is actually equity crowdfunding in some form. In Canada, it's regulated, or it's not regulated. It's basically there's an association. It's the National Crowdfunding Association of Canada that provides some background information about how crowdfunding happens. In the US, you have crowdfunding too, so the Jobs Act specifically allowed crowdfunding platforms to exist. I'm going to skip this slide and I'm going to talk about the Canadian circumstance. Now, if you want to do crowdfunding in Ontario, you have to use a registered platform. The platform actually has a lot of rules applied to it. And there's limits for how much the entrepreneurs can raise. I think they cannot raise more than 1.5 million over a 12-month period. There's limits for investors. It's 2,500 for any one deal and 10K in total per investor. So this is non-accredited investors, which of course raises the question of how do you, when you have multiple different platforms, how do you actually control that? It's, the investors have to self-report, but it's meant to be for protecting the investor, but the investor can probably circumvent it. Now, accredited investors can go up to $25,000 or $50,000 per year in total. All of these things are, so this is a relatively new thing. So the CSA has promised to, have some harmonized rules that were supposed to come out later this year. I have not seen them yet, but I may not have paid enough attention. COVID slowed down everything. Now, if you look at the global volume of crowdfunding, this is from a paper from Raghu Rao, you can see most of the crowdfunding campaigns that have occur in China, and then a reasonable amount of crowdfunding also occurs in the US. But really, crowdfunding means almost exclusively China. And now, in terms of the volume per capita, there's a lot going on in the US too, and in Europe. Canada is actually not that small either, considering that we're a small country. So you can see where the hotbed parts are. China, there's some in Australia, and then Europe, Germany, and the UK are quite active in that respect too. If you look at the amount raised in Canada, the total is, it's not dramatic, right? It's like $82 million. So it's not, compared to the private market of the $92 billion that are raised, this is a drop in the bucket. But, it's something that keeps growing, right? In the US, crowdfunding, the average deal is on the order of $14,000, which is, less, if you think about it, than what Lending Club does, for instance. Also keep in mind that, Lending Club small business loans are for working capital, so there's an existing firm that does things, whereas these crowdfunding campaigns are really for tiny, tiny startup ideas, somebody having another quadcopter or something, or a speaker or the like, right? So these are not massive undertakings, generally speaking. What is the future of this? What are the pros and cons of that? Well, cost of crowdfunding is not small, right? Because you need lawyers and accountants to put the numbers together. You have to pay these guys roughly $500 an hour. If it takes you $100 hours to prepare all the documents, that's $50,000 in cost. And for an average raise of $15,000, clearly that doesn't add up, right? There's also a platform fee. The SEC estimates it's roughly 5%. A very successful platform called WeFunder charges 7%. That's 70% of the entire revenue just goes to the platform. So this is massive, right? There's a massive cost on this. And in the US, the maximum amount is $1 million, and you have roughly 10% of costs. That's pretty substantial amount, right? So you also still have to do advertising, management, and so on and so forth. So raising money is actually an expensive enterprise. Now, what is it to investors? When you take the other side, of course, right? So if you want to make an investment of 100,000 K, that costs you roughly $50 per hour. If suppose you rather say you want to do, it takes you $50 an hour to make your own research. And if you look at the extent of the cost that you have, how does this add up? You have opportunity costs to be doing it. So the total cost for you as an investor are, would you be able to do the same investment in terms of your research? But it's hard to say. You can argue that in some sense, crowdfunding there's some wisdom of the crowd that you can use, right? But this is also not a trivial one. Now, one thing that people like to do and why they like participating is they think that they can have a particular impact in their investment. So they're doing something good, they help a startup, and so they can make a change to a small firm, and maybe there's something good coming from them. So WeFunder has a nice statement on its website, which I recommend you read when you read through the slides. But that kind of gives you a sense of the philosophy of the world of crowdfunding, of why they're doing what they're doing.